Fair warning, this show contains strong language and adult themes from time to time. Sorry, Jerry can't help it.
Sick Boy Wolfgang Productions presents The Offering with Jerry Horror. A deep dive into the history of film and its filmmakers. Mostly horror, always genre.
RetroSource Long Island is taking you back. Take a trip back in time with their custom-built store paying tribute to the best decades of all time, the 80s and the 90s. They have a massive collection of video games to choose from, spanning from Atari 2600 to Nintendo Switch, not to mention a large selection of toys, plushies, art, collectibles, board games, and so much more. They've got a friendly and quirky staff that loves to talk to you all about your favorite movies, cartoons, and TV shows that you grew up with. Check out their funny skits on their Instagram at RetroSourceLI. Do you love E.T., Thundercats, Back to the Future, Masters of the Universe, RoboCop, Street Fighter, Knight Rider, Ninja Turtles, Pokemon, Power Rangers? Yeah, man, RetroSource has got you covered. Take a photo in their Saved by the Bell high school locker display. It's totally mint. Spend hours playing arcade games while getting a sugar rush from vintage candy and soda. It's gnarly, buddy. Located at 1075 Portion Road in Farmingville, New York, RetroSource, Long Island's most radical shopping experience. Need more for your gore decor? HauntedProps.com has been a leading online Halloween retailer since 2006. And now, the company has opened the first and only year-round Halloween showroom on Long Island. The entire store is decorated and themed with immersive scenes. Yes, the whole thing is set up like a walk-through haunted attraction, and you're literally shopping in a haunted house. They've got gore props, haunted house props, costumes, masks, makeup, and did someone say animatronics? They've got those too. Designed to last and built to scare. Do you need legit-looking props for your film set or photo shoot? HauntedProps.com offers consumer-grade and professional-grade props. They've got something scary for any budget. Here's an idea. You need a location for your event? Haunted Props is a fantastic spot for flea markets, music festivals, carnivals, a haunted house, obviously, and any outdoor event you can dream of. Do yourself a favor. Go to the store in Manorville, Long Island, or order off the website, HauntedProps.com, where you can buy what scares you. Welcome to The Offering with Jerry Horror, the show where we can have a quiet and frank discussion as adults about the things that matter to me, or at least that I think matter to me. Please take a moment to subscribe to our show wherever you get fine podcasts, and hey, stay up to date on future episodes. Coming up, the 1994 action classic Speed was originally supposed to be the sequel to this film. What happens when you lose JCVD as the star of your movie? Strap in for the perfect 90s white guy karate movie. Stay tuned, you're not going to want to miss this. Ladies and gentlemen, friends beyond the binary, it's me, your host, Jerry Horror, and welcome to another pulse-pounding, exciting episode of The Offering. Wow. Summer blockbusters. We're covering quite a few of them this season. Franchise killers, franchise non-starters. Summer's that time of year when studios say to themselves, what's the biggest movie we can put out, Jerry? What's the biggest one? Well, usually Marvel would be a good formula to make money for a summer blockbuster. In the year of our Lord 2024, we're only getting one Marvel movie. Oh my God, shock. Despair. What do we do? Are there other movies? Can we go to movies that aren't Marvel movies? Well, here's the problem, and I'm gonna tell you the problem. Avengers Endgame, now the highest grossing movie of all time, depending on who you ask. Some days it's Avatar: The Way of Water, some days it's Marvel's The Avengers. Disney kind of played fast and loose with some of those numbers, but, allegedly. We won't get into that. Avengers Endgame is, even though it's building off of like 15 years of lore and all of this other nonsense, it is lightning in a bottle. It's a special movie. It's the curtain call. It's the victory lap. It's so many things. It's the end. Now, after that, we kind of had almost a little bit of a break. And then we had the Black Widow movie. They killed Black Widow. We had Shang-Chi. I like Shang-Chi. I think it was one of the best movies out of that entire, I think it was phase 4. I think that was the best out of them all. We got the Marvels. We got She-Hulk. I liked She-Hulk. I think it's just because I have an attraction to Tatiana Maslany, and I also have an attraction to big green women because I'm a weirdo. Yeah, it's like new kink unlocked. I remember reading that first issue of the Savage She-Hulk, and I was like, oh my God, I like green women now. Got really excited when Captain Kirk would sleep with a green lady. Like, ooh, they even did that. Even did that in the 2009 film, which is crazy. But yeah, Marvel's got a problem. People aren't buying what they're selling. We had franchise fatigue with that. We had a couple of franchise non-starters in the Marvel universe. People seem to be tuned out. We had Multiverse of Madness, which wasn't really what we thought it would be, okay? Then we had, because now we're in the multiverse, and yeah, multiverse is kind of played out now with like Rick and Morty. The Flash movie went and did the whole multiverse thing. It seemed to be the hot new trend. Even Avengers Endgame itself features time travel and some multiverse stuff. We had the Loki TV show, which was pretty good. Kind of Doctor Who vibes, the best of the bunch. Spider-Man No Way Home was probably the most successful. But here, look, I'm going to tell you why it was successful. Because people fucking love Tobey Maguire and they love Andrew Garfield. I think the reason that movie works so well is you've got some of the best villains. You got Doc Ock, you got the Green Goblin. They even redeemed the Shocker. Is his name the Shocker? Electro? Yeah, Electro. You got the Sandman. You know, you got a lot of Raimi elements in that movie. You've got almost more Raimi elements in No Way Home than you have in Multiverse of Madness, which is kind of crazy. But a lot of that, WandaVision was good. That wasn't bad. I like that. But this year we got nothing. We got Deadpool and Wolverine, and then the forthcoming Agatha All Along. I don't know, man. Like, even the Agatha All Along, when they first showed that trailer, it was like, oh shit, we're going to do some dark Twin Peaks horror stuff. And then it's like they undercut the middle of the trailer with like, well, I guess so. It's like a joke. And I'm like, no, you don't need to pause in the middle of everything to tell a joke. Stop with the Iron Manning. We've been Iron Manning this franchise for too long. It's cool when Robert Downey Jr. does it because he's effortlessly charming and cool, and everybody loves Tony Stark. We've got Fantastic Four coming next year. Blade, if it ever gets out of development hell. But with Deadpool and Wolverine, it's the only movie that we got in 2024. I think that movie works. I think it's almost falling apart at the seams sometimes. It's a great one-shot. To me, it's like, even Feige said it's not a part of Phase 5. He's like, it's just kind of its own standalone thing. And I think they need to learn from that lesson. Do a Hulk and Wolverine movie. Let's just get crazy. It doesn't have to do anything with the overall narrative. You can put a stinger scene at the end or whatever. But you should have some of these movies become self-contained, because seeing Deadpool and Wolverine was a big problem for me. And one of the big problems was I had a father with his teenage daughter, and then I had some other people in the back, and they're like, okay, so the TVA is from the Loki series. And like, there was this constant mansplaining that needed to be happening in the theater of like, oh, that's the guy who was in Shang-Chi, but now, and it's like, oh my God, what the fuck are we doing? Like, it comes with so much baggage. And Deadpool and Wolverine is saying goodbye possibly to Wolverine, but it's also saying goodbye to the Fox X-Men universe, because we're going to relaunch the mutants. And the mutants are hotter than ever before, because the other nostalgia act that has made a ton of money and sold a shitload of merchandise is X-Men 97. So we're kind of reaching this point of, I mean, obviously oversaturation is here. Wakanda Forever was good. I really enjoyed it, but here is the problem. This is the MCU's biggest problem. Captain America is now Joe Biden. He's retired. He's an old man. He's living with Peggy Carter. They're watching Matlock or whatever people do at that age. And we've got dead Tony Stark. We've got dead Black Widow. We've got a dead Black Panther. Who's even on the Avengers? So basically, it's kind of like a team. You've got like your rebuilding years where you're like trying to get new players and who's going to be the standout, who's going to be the star. Yeah, like Shang-Chi, great supporting character. And he should probably stay in his own little pocket. But the problem is like, does he become the leader? Does the Florence Pugh, does she become, they got the Thunderbolts coming out. Next year, they've got Captain America, the Brave New World, which looks to be more like Winter Soldier. But they're like, oh, that's not enough to get him in the door. So we've got Harrison Ford as the Red Hulk. And it's just like, what are we doing, man? What are we fucking doing? It's just gotten to this point where even though I enjoyed Deadpool and Wolverine, you can feel the film, not necessarily the film, but the entire universe, the weight of all this lore. Because the reason Deadpool and Wolverine works is because it's the multimedia verse. You've got stuff from the Capcom games. You've got stuff from the cartoon. There's deep cuts from the Wolverine video games in that movie. It's insane. There's so many hidden Easter eggs. Yes, if you've come with all of that baggage, fine. But it's very clear that the future is the mutants because of the response to X-Men 97. We need to kind of start over. If you're kind of over the age of 30, you grew up with all the mutant stuff and you love it. It's a part of, you played the games. You've grown up with Hugh Jackman. But now we kind of need to strike out on our own and do some different things. My advice, not that anybody from $1 billion company should take it, is we need to kind of start over. And by starting over, maybe that's what that Secret Wars movie needs to be. It needs to be kind of a soft reboot for the universe. Introduce some new characters, do some different things. But we need to figure out who the Avengers are. Because truth be told, the Avengers itself, every Avengers movie is like $1 billion movie. So it has the most visibility and cachet of all the titles. Essentially, you don't have any Avengers. So Marvel's really in a tough place right now, which Deadpool he acknowledges it. He's like, you're coming in at the low point of the Marvel universe. And remember, I always tell you, just when you think you've hit the bottom of the barrel, it can get lower because I have some predictions and hot takes to make. I think this Brave New World is going to be a disaster, this Captain America movie. I think it's not going to work. There's been tons of reshoots. That might even be an episode in the future because they had to add Giancarlo Esposito as the bad guy. And I'm like, dude, when you take a movie, and we've talked about this in many different seasons, and even in this season we're talking about it, when you take a movie, you crack it open like a submarine and then you weld it back together, you're always going to have leaks. And that's the problem with that movie is they've done so many reshoots. And I think what happens is Marvel tries to do all these things. And I think there are good intentions, like we're trying to, but you can't be all things to all people. If you're going to do a quieter, more spy-driven film that's an espionage film like Brave New World, you got to do it. But then if you're throwing in fantastical elements of the Red Hulk, it throws everything out the window. My advice, and not that Feige's going to take it, do more stuff like Deadpool and Wolverine. Do more one-shot movies. I didn't really like Thor: Love and Thunder. And then I watched it again at home, and I love it. It's this weird, funny, dopey movie that I like. There's a line in there Hemsworth says, and he's like, another classic Thor adventure. Yeah, you know what? Give me a classic Thor adventure. It doesn't have to propel the narrative forward. Just have Thor go on an adventure. And the problem was when you had Thor Ragnarok, it was successful. It's one of the best movies in that whole cycle. And the reason it works is because there's a delicate balance between high fantasy and science fiction stuff, but also with the comedy, kind of like him and Hulk. It's a buddy cop comedy. People get that. But the problem with Thor is that you go too silly and it doesn't work for people. Like this Thor: Love and Thunder, it doesn't work for people. If you go too serious, like The Dark World, that doesn't work for them either. So you need this kind of middle ground. And again, when you introduce multiverse, when you introduce magic, when you introduce these things into your film, especially time travel, nothing matters. Because once that's been brought to the table, there really are no stakes. Is anybody dead? Can we just resurrect people? We already have. It's happened. Oh, Gamora died. No, Gamora didn't die. This is a different Gamora. And it's like, all right, so you're telling me that nothing has weight and nothing has stakes. And when you tell an audience that, they say, why should I give a shit if you don't give a shit? And that is inherently the problem with the MCU. The storytelling has become the problem. Catering to this huge thing, this machine. It's kind of handicapped them in telling good, consistent stories with a through-line narrative. As much as I loved Deadpool and Wolverine, it is the sloppiest, wettest blowjob of fan service. And I even think fan service is a dirty word. You're going to that movie because you know who these characters are. You love these characters. We're going to see them go on an adventure. And it kind of works. And you know what? That's okay. It's okay. Like, if you're a fan of something, you know, whether it's Harry Potter, you know what you're getting into. So if they're there to please the fans, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem becomes you can't please everybody. And that's where they have this problem. And that's the problem with Star Wars too. You're trying to bring in new audiences. And unfortunately, most of the new audiences don't want it. Like with that new Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, I knew people that took their kids to go see it, and their kids are like, this is fucking lame. What's a Ghostbuster? They're like, I don't like this. So kids want their own new things. And that's why stuff like the Super Mario Brothers movie, yes, these characters have existed in many forms in the games and stuff like that. But the reason it works is because it's something new. Even Barbie was something, even though it's an old character with all this history, it's something for them to glom onto. There's been kind of this groundswell with this new Crow movie. And the problem there is very simple. You grew up with Brandon Lee. He gave his life to make the movie, and it had all the music, and it had its cultural relevancy, and it was cool. It was not Batman Forever. It was the antithesis of a film like that. And kids my age got to glom onto that. And I think what they're not realizing is that kids are very interested in this new Crow movie, because it has Skarsgård's becoming this matinee idol, for better or worse. Did you see Boy Kills World? It's really good. Give it a shot. It's a definite recommend. Well, hopefully it all works out, because I grew up, I got all kinds of stuff here in my apartment, and I really enjoy the Marvel Universe, but I think they do need to take a step back, and we have to worry about quality over quantity, and maybe focus on one story at a time. And we'll get there. We'll get back to that. Everything has ebbs and flows. Is the Marvel Universe dead? The Marvel Cinematic Universe? No, it's not dead. It's just going through a weird rebuilding phase. And that's okay, because even in life, we go through the same things. There's highs, there's lows. And sometimes you got to assess the situation and say, hey, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? And how do I move forward? Speaking of moving forward, man, this season is wild. Franchise killers, franchise non-starters. Today's episode is all about a guy who should have been the next big action star. For all intents and purposes, we should have gotten 20 movies with this guy, but we didn't. And we're going to touch on that again later in the season. Why didn't this work? Why weren't there sequels? Why wasn't there a series of films? Well, we're going to get into that. We're going to explore it. But if you'd like to know who this gentleman is, you're going to have to wait until after the break. Of all the films that we've done so far on The Offering, this movie is the most personal and deeply connected that I've ever had. So I figured it would really be a good choice, because obviously it plays into the whole franchise killers, franchise non-starters. And there's no greater franchise non-starter than Jeff Speakman, who, real-life martial artist, he's the real deal, he's incredible, he's now a master. But let's get into this. This is, all right.
He looks like anyone else you'd pass on the street.
Give me your money now, sucker.
Except for one thing.
You want my money? Huh? Is this what you want?
He has a slight attitude.
No problem.
Paramount Pictures presents international Kenpo star Jeff Speakman.
Should be more respectful of our organization.
Is there a problem here? Yeah. Guess so.
Hey, Terminator, I don't know where you came from, but you better go back. Those guys are going this. You're a dead man.
A tragedy he could not prevent.
Cam! It's a signature execution. We've seen it before.
Leads him into a forbidden world with nothing to rely on but his own lethal skills.
Who killed Kim?
You cannot handle this by yourself.
Who said it never hurt to ask?
Everybody in Koreatown knows Young killed Kim, Dick. Tracy.
Now, we are ready. Young and I have some unfinished business. I will finish it.
He has no gun. No fear.
Are you faster than a speeding bullet?
No equal.
No problem.
In his explosive motion picture debut, Jeff Speakman is the perfect weapon.
The perfect weapon would never happen today. Studios just won't take a chance on taking a random martial artist and making him a star. There's a reason that this happened. Warner Brothers had Steven Seagal, Universal had Jean-Claude Van Damme, and it became one of those things of keeping up with the Joneses. So Paramount was like, we need a martial arts action star. And The Perfect Weapon was originally going to be another vehicle for Jean-Claude Van Damme, but it didn't happen for various reasons. You know, he went to greener pastures. And I don't know if I don't know. Like, if you do this film with Van Damme, does it really work? Kind of. It could work, but I don't think that he fits into because it's a star vehicle. You don't get star vehicles like this. I mean, even the way that they found Jeff Speakman, somebody was like, hey, we should get this guy in a movie. So they shot a bunch of action stuff with him. And it was another case like Seagal, where they shot the stuff for Above the Law. And people saw the footage. They saw him on 35 millimeter, and they're like, he's good looking. He's got the look. He's got the moves. Let's make a movie. I think the easiest way to bring this in is Ed Parker. Who is Ed Parker? Ed Parker was born in Honolulu in 1931. By the age of 12, he had trouble with bullies, and his father made him join judo. So Ed Parker ends up studying many different styles. Now, over in Hawaii, you have a close proximity to Okinawa. So there's a lot of Okinawan styles that come into play. Eventually what happens is Ed decides he's going to serve in the Coast Guard. So he does a bit of traveling, and he's introduced to a man named Professor William Chow, who would introduce him to Kempo. And that's Kenpo. The word Kempo translates thus: Ken meaning fist and Po meaning method or law, as in the law of gravity. A correct interpretation of the word Kempo would be fist method, the same meaning as Kwanfa. However, it is often misinterpreted as the law of the fist, and the generic nature of the term, combined with its widespread cross-cultural adoption in the martial arts community, has led to many divergent definitions. And there are various styles of Kempo. Really, what it is that Ed Parker went on to study a bunch of Chinese styles. He's studying Kung Fu, he's studying Hung Gar Kung Fu. What I will tell you is that a lot of that Kung Fu comes into play because even in the Okinawan styles, you had the Chinese influence. And even though most Japanese people have always had kind of this weird thing with the Chinese, they both have cross-pollinated their martial arts. Kung Fu is, which kind of means ultimate supreme, is one of the oldest of all the martial arts, and it can be felt and found. Luckily, I've been able to study different stuff. Once I was able to start studying Wing Chun, which is very much like Kempo, it's a street style. It's a style that has been brought through many different iterations, through different lineage. People are greedy and everybody wants to take credit. So you've got all these aberrations. It's like the Bible. There's a million different versions of it. There's all these different, but at the end of the day, it all has its roots, I think, pretty much in Kung Fu. And that's really important because Parker streamlined everything that he knew from Goju Ryu, from Kung Fu, and he turns this into his own, the American Kempo system. And much like Bruce Lee, he takes this and he makes his own fighting style. And he adopts all these various forms of martial arts that work. You know, that's what Bruce Lee did with Jeet Kune Do. And Bruce Lee, obviously, he was the first. He's the granddaddy. Because yes, there had been kung fu films and there had been martial arts movies, but Bruce Lee was this live wire who could do things that no one could do. And he brought kind of a dangerous sexual energy, as well as kind of leading man good looks, the physique, the total package, the personality. He's a badass. When you see that on a big screen, you want to fucking be like Bruce Lee. And for a long time, we were all just living in the shadow of Bruce Lee. Even people like Jackie Chan, even people like Donnie Yen, they would say, oh, do it like Bruce. I'm like, I'm not Bruce Lee, and only Bruce Lee can do Bruce Lee. And there's a reason. I have a tattoo on my back of Bruce Lee. I have different tattoos of people. And I thought that it would help me further ascertain some of that knowledge. By having him on my body, that I could somehow tap into that mana, that energy. Has it worked? I don't know. Not really. But, wishful thinking. I tried. Eventually, Parker would move to the United States and open his first dojo in the 1950s. He was over in the Midwest and then over in Utah. He helped a lot of different martial artists because Parker was really good at business. He was good at selling things. He was good at marketing, which he would pass on later, but he had a keen sense for business. So he knew how to run a dojo and he knew how to make a dojo profitable. Ultimately, he ends up becoming a stunt coordinator for a bunch of movies. He was in The Curse of Pink Panther, most famously. He's just a bad guy. He's a white bad guy karate man, which, we'll get into. Really, what launches him is a chance meeting with Elvis Presley. He ends up becoming a bodyguard for Elvis Presley. One night in Vegas, somebody tried to get a little handsy with Elvis. He's leaving one of these clubs after a show, and Ed Parker lit this dude up. He beat the shit out of this guy. And Elvis is like, oh my God, I got to know what you know, Ed. Ed was like, okay. He's like, we're going to start teaching you Kempo. And Elvis was fascinated. He was teaching him karate. He was teaching him all these different things. And that's also kind of what led to him being a stunt coordinator on movies. Because people were still, Elvis was a god. And people were like, oh, this is the guy who taught Elvis karate. And they'd be like, oh, really? Oh, it's the guy who taught Elvis karate? And what's even crazier is that Priscilla Presley ends up running away when she moves on from Elvis with her karate instructor. This has happened. This has happened before. Giselle, who was Tom Brady's wife, she's learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She runs away with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There was something very sexy about the Karate Man, because inherently a martial artist is a dangerous person, but if they've learned the right things, they're also a very smart person because they've gotten the wisdom of the martial arts. And that's really where we talk about martial science and how does this all interplay. Because martial arts is a way of life. It's not just how to defend yourself, it's the proper way to live, and that you should treat people nicely until they're not nice. And then you can light them up like Ed Parker. Oh, wow, that was amazing. Can't do the Elvis. Oh, wow, that was amazing, Ed. Can you do more of that? Look, Parker trained everybody from Benny the Jet Urquidez to Bob White. He trained so many martial artists, helped open so many schools. He's so influential. He ends up becoming friends with Bruce Lee. And him and Bruce are cross-pollinating. They're showing each other the styles. And he's like, I got Jeet Kune Do, I got American Kempo. Let's see what we can work out here. So he pushes and he says, listen, I know that we've got this big karate championship. It's the International Karate Championship in Long Beach, California. He's like, Bruce, why don't I bring you out and you just demonstrate some of this Jeet Kune Do for people? And Bruce was like, I don't know, it's a karate thing. I'm more, based in Kung Fu. He talks Bruce into it. And then Ed Parker is friends with Steve McQueen. Then Steve McQueen and James Coburn start learning Jeet Kune Do from Bruce Lee. So Ed Parker really has a lot of ties. And this goes back to the keen business sense. He knows how to network. He knows how to introduce people to one another. He kind of becomes one of these guys that, hey, you want a karate guy? we've got a karate guy. Ed had 3 daughters and 1 son, and his son was never really interested in martial arts. Let's enter Jeff Speakman. Now, Jeff Speakman was he's just a regular guy. There's nothing remarkable, but what I can tell you about him is that he had a very bad relationship with his father. And I think, and he's gone on record saying this, he was searching for a father figure, and he found that in Ed Parker. And Ed Parker found a great student because this was a guy who was going to listen to anything he said. He was going to be Ed's best student, his number 1 pupil. He still is. He basically becomes the protege. Jeff Speakman is doing some acting classes and some improv stuff. And he says to him, he goes, Jeff, you got the look, you're handsome. You're a handsome white guy, and you should probably give it a shot. So he does a couple of stints on like General Hospital and some soap operas just to get his feet wet. And he's like, Jeff, you can take this. You're one of the best martial artists I've ever seen and I've ever trained. You can take this. You can take this American Kempo, this style, and bring it to a wider audience. Because that's kind of what Bruce Lee did. Bruce Lee's doing Jeet Kune Do, and people are like, oh my God, I have to go run out and learn Jeet Kune Do. It was the same thing with the Ultimate Fighting Championships and the Gracies. People, for the most of us growing up, especially in the 90s, were like, what's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? This is insane. And it basically put every martial artist on notice that you need a ground game. You're going back to your Sifu or your master, and you're saying like, hey, do we have ground stuff? And most martial arts styles do, but not to what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has, where it's basically a system that's designed around grappling. And it became a part of it, just like Jeet Kune Do. Parker is looking for a way to get his style out there in a bigger way. Now, we need to talk about Marc DeSalle, because this is going to make sense. Marc DeSalle, New York born, he's a producer, he's a director, he's done writing, he's done everything. But most importantly, in the late 80s, early 90s, he produced 3 Jean-Claude Van Damme films. He produced Bloodsport, which he did. He was on set every day. Even though he was a producer on Bloodsport, he was working with Jean-Claude. They became very good friends. And then he says to him, look, I got this movie Kickboxer, and I think that you would be perfect in it. He's like, I'm going to direct it. He goes, I've never directed a movie before, but I'm going to direct you in Kickboxer. And Van Damme is like, all right, cool. What happens is Ed Parker sends Jeff Speakman over to audition for Kickboxer. And he's like, Jeff, he's like, you're just not right for this movie. He goes, I don't know what it is. He goes, but I think, Jean-Claude's kind of hot right now. It's not the right time. But he remembered Speakman because Speakman was an incredible martial artist and he was a really good looking guy. So he told Jeff, he's like, listen, go, keep doing more local theater, keep doing the soap operas. And, when the time is right, we'll find a project for you. Then he goes on to make Death Warrant with Van Damme. Essentially, what kind of happens after Death Warrant, because that was originally going to be a Cannon film, got picked up by MGM, which at that point, MGM was still a major studio, but they were floundering. They needed hits. So they said, all right, well, if we get Van Damme, these movies seem to make money, and they're making a ton of money on VHS. And I told you, previous episode, the Steven Seagal episode, Sick Plug, these guys cleaned up on VHS. Whereas you could make a movie that'll come out, maybe it'll do 20 million box office wise, but on VHS, you could make 60 million. Because dumb teenagers like me, we didn't have the Marvel universe. Our heroes were more cemented in reality. If the 80s was Schwarzenegger and Stallone's decade, the 90s were kind of Seagal and Van Damme's decade. It wasn't just enough to have the one-liners or the muscle. You had to have skills. You had to have something else that would lure young men in. And let's face it, the karate craze was nuts. After the Karate Kid, and especially Ninja Turtles and everything else, everybody wanted to learn karate. Growing up in the 80s, it was insane. There were no less than 15 publications that I would read. There was Ninja Magazine, there was Inside Kung Fu, there was Black Belt, there were 100 different things. And we were all obsessed with it. And then you had Cannon's films like American Ninja, and you had Chuck Norris. And Chuck Norris was very influential to Jeff Speakman. And the reason being, and this is why Chuck Norris, especially to Americans, we have to think about this from an American perspective in the 80s, it's a white guy. Look, I really wish that I could tell you there was a way to clean this up, but we have to be honest. And a lot of us had never seen somebody that was Caucasian and could do these things. Because there was a time in this country that people thought, well, you know, Kung Fu is some kind of Chinese secret. And that's why Bruce Lee can do it. And only Asian people can do martial arts. And with the proliferation and rise of Chuck Norris, see, he gets the ultimate cosign. He's in Return of the Dragon, and he fights Bruce Lee in the Coliseum at the end. And that was the cosign. That's the ultimate cosign. Dude, you're good enough to hold your own with Bruce Lee? Shit. Get you your own movie. And that's kind of what happened. They made a force of one. They made Breaker Breaker. A lot of these cheap, quickie, cash-in white guy karate movies. And white guy karate is a subgenre of its own. When it's at its best, well, all right, white guy karate is never at its best. There are some problems, but it very much lends itself to fantasy. And a lot of it becomes the white savior thing. It's the white guy who's taught by Asian people how to kick ass and how to be a martial artist. And then he's got to save these poor, defenseless Asian people, which is a lot of what The Perfect Weapon is, but we'll get into that. Is it problematic in 2024? Yes, it's problematic. But as a product of the 80s and 90s and watching these films, I mean, we used to rent all of them. There was Jeff Wincott. Jeff Wincott was from Canada. You had Richard Norton, he's Australian. You had Cynthia Rothrock. You had all these different action stars. And it created this new market. We always talk about, I'm Jerry Horror. Well, there were a million horror movies, but there were also a million martial arts movies. Martial Law, Undercover, Martial Law 2, We're Going to the Zoo. All kinds of stupid nonsense, but I rented them. Every week I was renting these movies, and I love them. And I think what happens is there becomes this power fantasy that you're going to get the knowledge from the master, which is a trope. It's a trope of all martial arts films. It's a trope of Star Wars and anything else, where you go and there's a wise old wizard, there's a master like an Obi-Wan, and you go to this dude and he instills all the wisdom into you and shows you how to live a better life and how to be your own man and how to be a hero. It created this weird thing, even in my mind. If I see a crowd of Asian people and they're in danger, I'm like, oh, I have to defend them. And why do I think that? Because I watched 1,000 movies that were about that, and that's what white guy karate is. Even if you watch, early film with Jean-Claude Van Damme, No Retreat, No Surrender, that's Corey Yuen, who most successfully did the Transporter films with Statham, another white guy karate movie if you think about it. In No Retreat, No Surrender, our hero conjures up the ghost of Bruce Lee, which is so ridiculous and almost disrespectful in some ways. That was why you had all the Bruce Lee clones. And thanks to a lot of these boutique Blu-ray, some of those movies were good. A lot of them were bad. But it was always like the ghost of Bruce Lee in The Curse of Bruce Lee. And it was like, all right. So they would get Bruce Lee, L-I, Bruce Lee, L-E. And there were all these imposters. And that was a problem with Jackie Chan's career. In Jackie Chan's career, they tried to put him in that movie with Danny Aiello, The Protector. They tried to put him in The Brawl, Battle Creek. They tried all these different things. But at the end of the day, Jackie Chan wasn't Bruce Lee. He does physical comedy. Yes, he does kung fu. He does martial arts, but he's not Bruce Lee. And we were living in the shadow of that. I think also there is a degree of gentrification that happens because Chuck Norris is a tough guy. He's got the charisma of a 2x4. I mean, the dude, look, I love him. He's great. I've met him. That was a big thing. I got to meet Chuck Norris at a karate tournament. I still have the autograph. And that was a big day for me. But essentially what it said to young white men was, you can do this too. And now, you might not be able to relate to a black guy. You might not be able to relate to an Asian man. You might not, but this white guy's doing it and he kind of looks like you. And I think that's the secret of Jeff Speakman. Jeff Speakman has a very everyman look. He looks like just another guy. He could be stocking shelves at a grocery store. And even the beginning of this movie, he's working as a construction guy. He's a regular kind of blue collar. He's got stubble. He's got a fantastic early 90s haircut. He looks like the everyman. And that's why it's a perfect film, because he's so kind of vanilla in this movie that you can transpose yourself. You can graft yourself onto this everyman who is a martial arts master. And that's kind of why this film really works. It has a fantastic cast. I mean, oh my God, up and down. I think every major Asian actor at the time is in this movie. We're going to get into the cast a little bit. Mark DeSalle's got this problem. Paramount comes to him and they say, hey, we want a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. And he's like, that's great. Now, little do they not know that his 3-picture deal, because what these producers would do, he came on to Bloodsport and he's like, yo, I'm going to bankroll your next movies, but you're in an exclusive contract to me. And what happens is Mark DeSalle, who, believe it or not, before he was a director or a producer, he was a certified public accountant. He was a very good businessman in New York. And he applies all of that because business is business. Whether it's the movie business or whether you're selling cola or you're selling cotton candy, it applies. The rules of business never change. So he's got this 3-picture deal with Van Damme, and then Van Damme does Death Warrant, and Van Damme's like, yo, Universal wants to distribute Lionheart, and they told me that if Lionheart does good, I'm going to sign like a 5-picture deal. And a part of that was Hard Target, The Quest, that became Time Cop, and those are some of his, Street Fighter. Like, say what you will about Street Fighter, it's a terrible film, but it's a very profitable film because everybody knows what Street Fighter is, and they were like, oh, cool, Van Damme, this makes sense. But it was really a family film that was kind of like G.I. Joe the movie. Rest in peace, Raul Julia. Whew, pour one out for that motherfucker. That was his last movie. And I'm going to tell you, stay tuned for the Street Fighter episode because, man, that's eventually got to happen because what a disaster that film was. Oof. Woof. So, yeah, he's got a problem. I don't have a star. And he's scrambling. And the thing is, I like about Mark DeSalle, Kickboxer is one of my favorite movies, but he's a hustler. Even when he was making Kickboxer, they shot in Thailand, they shot a little bit in the Philippines, and when they were in Thailand, he needed extras. He needed extras to be at the kickboxing events. So he went to the military and he's like, let me get a bunch of soldiers. He says, well, how many do you need? He goes, I can give you 5,000. He's like, what? You can give me 5,000 Thai soldiers? And he's like, yeah. What are you going to do for me? So he was the general of the army. He gave him a couple of bucks and he says, this is my Rolls Royce. You can use it for a week or whatever. So he ends up getting all these extras, and it's kind of like, as a producer, as a director, you have to take what you've got. You've got to take whatever resources you have, and you've got to apply them. And that's really what a smart director or producer does. They take whatever they've got and they put it on the big screen. So he's scrambling. He knows he's not going to get Seagal. The word is already out on Seagal. It's 91, it's 1990, probably late 1990. He remembers the guy who auditioned for Kickboxer. He says, Jeff, I got a movie for you. And now we enter Jeff Speakman, who, aside from moonlighting as a soap star, and he's got the perfect like square jaw, dimple chin that, the 5 o'clock shadow, the whole thing. He's very soap opera sexy. He's the kind of guy, it's like, oh, I'm in love with my best friend's brother. Jeff Speakman would be the brother. That was kind of his thing. So he's pretty much not doing martial arts on screen. He's smooching, Susan Lucci. So, and that's not a bad gig either. I like smooching. Who doesn't? You get to smooch all these beautiful women. It's fantastic. Incredible. I was thinking about the smooching and I got sidelined completely. I was like, wow, Susan Lucci. Yeah, so Jeff Speakman's like, dude, I am in. Paramount's like, well, what's this guy done? And he's like, nothing. He's like, he's got a reel, and his reel is him smooching women on soap operas. And they're like, well, that doesn't really help us, Mark. Can you further elaborate on who this person is? So he says, hold tight, I'll be back. So at this point, Speakman has a dojo that he's teaching at during the day. That's kind of his side hustle, is martial arts. He says, all right, we need to get you in a studio. He's like, get a bunch of your students. We're going to shoot this. So they get some fancy Panavision cameras, 35 millimeter, and they shoot this fight scene. At that time, Paramount was still being run by Frank Minusco Sr. and Jr., and Frank Minusco Jr. had shepherded all of the Friday the 13th films. And he was a cool dude, still a really cool guy. And Frank was like, listen, I like martial arts movies. I like horror movies. He's a fan of genre films. He would probably be a fan of the Offering podcast because this is his bread and butter. So it was like a no-brainer. It was like, well, this is the move. We need a new guy. We need our own guy because, man, fucking Van Damme and Seagal are just making all this money. And there's a formula. And I say this all the time, and everybody knows, if you know me, I desperately, one day, if I interview enough directors, I want to make my own martial arts movie. It's always been a dream of mine because I understand it. I understand the complexities and the nuances that go into the choreography. And the reality of it is that you need real martial artists. You can't, it's not playtime. I mean, you can teach an actor, and that became the problem later. We had guys like Keanu Reeves where we have to teach him Kung Fu. And then eventually Keanu Reeves loves doing the martial arts on screen so much that he becomes a martial artist. There was this thing that happens after the 90s where we had actors like Matt Damon who weren't traditional people who had studied martial arts, but we can make them look good on camera. And that becomes the thing. Because once you do that, well, you've got a great actor in Matt Damon, but he doesn't know karate. But that's fine because we can make it look like he knows karate. We can get some stunt doubles, some CGI magic, a couple different things, a little bit of wire fu. I mean, even Thor Love and Thunder. He does the splits. He does the splits and then he does the 360 kick. And I know how they did that 360 kick. He didn't really do it. He either that was a stunt person or they had him on wires. The 360 kick is really tough to pull off on camera and to do it right. He 360 kicks like a tank, which is awesome. But hey, I love those little nods to what came before. Essentially, though, Paramount is like, listen, you've got a go picture. He goes, we will greenlight this. We will give you a budget. But the reason that it works, getting back to that formula, the reason that it works is because there's a very simple mathematic thing. Okay, we spend $5 to $10 million on this movie. And then it'll clean up on VHS. It'll do good theatrically. And look, I hate to say it, but that's a sound business model. You know, you spend a couple of bucks, you make a ton of money. Every studio is saying to themselves, we need a martial arts superstar. And Jeff Speakman, call it serendipity, call it right guy at the right time. But he gets a $10 million movie from Paramount. And they're like, we're going to do this. You got a green light. So let's go make the perfect weapon. So in the early 90s, there's this huge groundswell of dance music. There's Black Box, there's The Real McCoy, there's CNC Music Factory, there's Technotronic, and dance music is very big. But the difference with this dance music was that it had a little bit of a harder hip hop edge. Even people like MC Hammer kind of adopted that, you know, where it was kind of like, it's a dance song, but it's also hip hop. We got some rapping, and you had Snap. Exclamation point, Snap. They had a really hot song at the time called The Power, which is a jam. It actually appears in a Fresh Prince episode. Will is upstairs and the whole house is shaking and it's moving. Aunt Viv is like, it's Will. He's upstairs. He's like, he's listening to that song by Snap, The Power. And it's like, yeah, because when you hear that song, there's just something about it. It's like that Mortal Kombat theme. It's just so infectious. They were like, all right, how do we introduce Jeff Speakman to the audience? And this is the coolest thing because it is the ultimate cherry on the top of the sundae. You've been given $10 million, which is a lot for a martial arts movie. Sometimes they would have like, with cheapo martial arts movies, you've got to choreograph it. You've got to make it happen quick. No, this was different. We're shooting this on the Paramount backlot. We've got access to tons of stuff. We open this movie. Jeff Speakman's like digging a ditch. He's a construction guy. It's saying to the audience, he's a blue collar guy. Now it's nighttime. He's doing kata. He's oiled up a bit. He's sweaty. He's got a body that's attainable. He's got a body that, like, if you watched what you ate and you went to the gym a couple of days a week, you could look like him. Van Damme is like Superman. Van Damme is like Bruce Lee. He's got this crazy physique that, you'd have to really work to get. And we open up with him doing kata. Snaps, the power comes on. And it's like everything was built on this. What a powerful introduction. We did not know who this person is. But you saw he's a construction worker, you saw he's a blue-collar guy, and now he's doing kata to this hot song that's tearing up the charts. I got the power. And he's doing it, and it's working. And it's like, oh my God. So they realize, like, this opening scene is killer. I think what would happen with martial arts movies, you would be a bit player, or you would do other movies, and then you would get your own vehicle. This guy had a starring vehicle out of Jump Street, and I will tell you, I will swear to you, that will never happen again. I mean, knocking on wood, I hope it does happen again. I hope they give some young martial artist a chance, but a lot of times it's just they feel it's too risky to spend that kind of money. It would be the equivalent of them spending $25 million today on just what they would perceive as a way to launch an action star or do a cheapo martial arts movie. So with the power, no pun intended, of this song, it became the advertising campaign. They even did a music video that you can find over in Germany that intercut scenes from the movie, because the movie became so popular overseas that it was tied to the song for a long time in Europe, which is like the craziest thing to me, but it happened. And I can't think of any other first appearance of a martial arts actor that was so powerful and blew the doors open. Like, we know who this guy is. We know exactly who he is, and now we're seeing what he's capable of, and it was incredible. I begged my parents to see this movie, and of course they gave in, because white guy karate was a huge thing in my house, and we would go see all these movies. And it was one of those things, even my father years later, he's like, whatever happened to Jeff Speakman? He's like, that movie was great, because I watched it a million times. I owned it on VHS. I had to have the official VHS. I wasn't taping this shit off HBO. I had to have that real deal shit from Paramount to get that dope in my veins. This film has an incredible cast. John Dye is in this movie. He plays Jeff's brother, who ends up becoming a police officer, and Jeff is like, no, I'm just going to be a weird kind of Wolverine loner and do construction. Because that's kind of, he was this gifted martial artist. At a certain point, he's like, oh, you've got nothing for me, Master Lowe. And he's like, all right, you need to go find yourself. And he's like, I will find myself in a one-bedroom apartment with my fancy silk robe doing karate. But John Dye, most famously, was Virgil in Best of the Best. And he did a bunch of martial arts movies. And it's crazy, too, because he plays a cop in this, and he doesn't do any karate. This guy's a martial artist. Why is he not doing karate? I get it. But, like, you could have had some fight scenes. You could have had something. He's actually doing a lot of Jesus movies right now. I guess the less said about that, the better. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's fine to do Jesus movies. But there is kind of like this dirty, until you make a ton of money. Then everybody like, oh, The Sound of Freedom. Okay, now we're listening. Those people are crazy. We've got Mako, who in Steve McQueen flick, The Sand Pebbles. He's in the Conan movies. He's another guy who's been in like a billion movies. We got James Hong. Obviously, you probably know him from Big Trouble in Little China. And most recently, Everything Everywhere All at Once. He's a fantastic genre actor. There's Mariska Hargitay, who plays Jennifer, who would later go on to Law and Order fame. But what's crazy is there's a TV cut. And people were always saying, like, wow, this movie is like 88 minutes, which is the perfect length for what this film is. It goes down smooth. You couldn't make it better. But Mariska Hargitay plays the love interest in this movie. And you see them, they grow up as kids together, and she keeps kind of looking at him with the bedroom eyes and whatnot. And you're kind of like, what's going on there? You like Jeff Sanders? You're into him? He's cool? Now, if you watch the TV version, which is widely available on YouTube, check it out, the whole romantic subplot is there. And he basically kind of abandons her as a teenager. There's kind of this whole like unrequited love between them. So yeah, there was a whole subplot. There is sexual tension there. There's definitely some admiration mutually. You got Bo Starr, who most famously, you know him from The Last Dragon, but you definitely know him from Dumb and Dumber. He's just fantastic in everything he does. Seth Sakai as Master Lo. He's another guy. It's just, he's the bald Asian guy with a mustache. He has like this one look, and he's been in a million movies, and it's just absolutely incredible. You got Dante Basco, who most famously, you probably know him from Hook. Hook was a very big film. For fans of Avatar: The Last Airbender, the original animated series, there's actually a connection to The Perfect Weapon. Dante Basco and Mako were voices of fan favorites Prince Zuko and Uncle Ira. Who would have known? But hey, here we are. Incredible. There's all kinds of connections here. Because wait, okay. We've got Professor Toru Tanaka, who most famously played Oddjob, who you probably know from the GoldenEye video game if you grew up with N64. He was the James Bond villain that just kept coming back and you couldn't stop him. He's actually a Hawaiian guy. Let me tell you something. I got to meet Professor Toru Tanaka. He used to do a lot of conventions and stuff. Really nice guy. And he was very generous with his time and whatnot. He answered all my stupid questions as a child. Because, of course, I had a million stupid questions. I still do. That's why we're doing this podcast. You've got Kari... Oh, sorry. When I say a Japanese name, I have to say it all at once. Otherwise, I lose it. It's Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa, who you obviously remember from Mortal Kombat. You know, come on. You know most famously who he played. He was Shang Tsung in Mortal Kombat. But he's been in a million movies, too. He was even in Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes. He was a bad guy. Sick plug. Go back to that Planet of the Apes episode. Find out what went wrong there. Definitely not having it was having Mark Wahlberg in the movie. What's going on, bro? Bro, I don't know if you know this. It's fucking Planet of the Apes. It was like, yes, Mark, it is. You're in the film Planet of the Apes. Bro, I'm in a movie right now? I thought I just wandered from craft services and there were all these monkeys. Whoa. And it's crazy, too, because they even cut, there was a lot of stuff with Dante Basco, and he's very funny in this movie. But they were like, listen, like, this is an action movie. You can't have all this shit with the kid. You got to cut the kid shit out. Like, all right, fine. There's a ton of stuff. You got James Liu. You got Roger Wan. Basically, every major martial arts stunt guy was in this film. It's absolutely insane. They got literally the best of the best in this movie. I should also mention that Russell Carpenter was the cinematographer on this movie, who goes on to win an Oscar for Titanic. And he did a bunch of these movies. He did a bunch of like low budget martial arts movies, and it's crazy. He did horror stuff. Listen, look up Russell Carpenter. He's got so many movies that he did, but eventually he becomes like James Cameron's go-to guy, and he's doing these Avatar movies. But the humble beginnings, you know, you do the Jeff Speakman movie and it leads to the Land of Gold. It is what it is. You got music by Gary Chang. Gary Chang was like a go-to guy. He ends up doing music for Hard Target. He did a bunch of these.
We'll be right back with more of The Offering with Jerry Horror.
Attention horror movie buffs. Remember the good old days back when Netflix would actually deliver physical media to your mailbox? How often do you find yourself reminiscing about those trips to your local video store, sifting through every single collection, discovering a movie treasure that you've never seen before? If niche is your knack, then Mailbox Movies is the DVD delivery service for you. Their meticulously curated collection has something for every horror enthusiast. With simple online ordering and speedy DVD delivery right to your front door, Mailbox Movies has unbeatable prices that will give you more screams for your buck. Remember to use the promo code JerryHorror for 50% off your first month. Don't settle for less. Get the best in horror delivered to your door. Head on over to mailboxmovies.com and start your terrifying movie marathon today. It's always Halloween at the Haunted House of Hamburgers, Long Island's only Halloween-themed restaurant. At Haunted House of Hamburgers, they are obsessed with both Halloween and hamburgers, so why not have the best of both worlds every day? Salivate over their delicious hamburgers during Boo Brunch, along with their Witch's Brew and Crypt Keeper cocktails. Or take a stab at the undead desserts, such as I Scream Sundays, with your bobbing for apple pie. My favorites are the Afterlife alcoholic shakes. I'd go for the Pentagram Passion Fruit, or the Exorcism Espresso Martini Shake, or my go-to, the Loch Ness Monster Lobster Rolls. This place is fun as hell. They even encourage you to come dine in, dressed in costume. Your kids will love that. Or that could be one hell of a memorable first date. They're not going to forget that, right? Here's a little insider tip. For a far-out, trippy dining experience, ask your waiter for 3D glasses. It's pretty rad, let me tell you. Located at 330 Fulton Street in Farmingdale, New York, it's the restaurant that looks like a haunted house. You won't miss it, I promise. Make Haunted House of Hamburgers your year-round Halloween destination. Listeners and fans of The Offering can get their hands on their very own The Offering with Jerry Horror merch, now only at TeePublic. Find your own fresh The Offering with Jerry Horror high-quality merchandise, including t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, long sleeves, stickers, and mugs. Just like the show, we've got gear that's mostly horror, always genre. The Offering with Jerry Horror TeePublic store has everything you need to represent your favorite podcast. Folks, head on over to teepublic.com right now and pick up your very own Offering tee today. You're listening to The Offering with Jerry Horror. Got a question or a story you want to share with me? It might be featured in a future episode. Email me at jerryhorror@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at jerryhorror. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me there at jerryhorror. Rate and review this show on Apple Podcast, and you might find your review in an upcoming episode. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to The Offering. Now back to the show. Now, the reason The Perfect Weapon is such a great movie is that it shows the American experience of martial arts. You go to a dojo that's in a strip mall or that's around the corner, and you go and you learn martial arts. And then we get to see him as a kid, and his brother gets hit by this football player, and he just opens up a can of whoop ass on this dude. And his father's like, all right, you can't live here no more. So he decides to leave home. And Mariska Hargitay is looking at him like, hey, I thought we had something going on here. And he goes to Master Lowe, and Master Lowe is like, all right, dude, you got to find yourself, bro. You're out of control. He's like, there's the dragon and the tiger. And he's like, the dragon is wisdom and the tiger is rage. And he's like, you're just full of rage. So ostensibly, I guess Jeff Speakman goes off and does his own thing and kind of doesn't talk to his family, which is, I don't know. I mean, just for beating up a football player. But The Perfect Weapon encapsulates that experience, that martial arts in America. At this point, I kind of got to go into it. When I was a kid, I used to get bullied. I ended up going from a school that was like a public school, and I went to Catholic school. And a lot of those kids thought that I was just like an ignorant, piece of white trash that was being bussed in from the bad neighborhood. And they were all friends. These kids had been friends since they were in elementary school. And they mercilessly tormented me. They would beat me up. They would jump me. I would have like 2 or 3 kids at a time beating the shit out of me. And it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. It's made me the person that I am today, but it changes my life. Because I start watching martial arts movies. And another Mark DeSalle movie that he directed was Kickboxer. And I was like, oh my God. So I started trying to mimic the movements and the things that I saw on screen, but I really had no idea what I was doing. And I kind of did the Ralph Macchio thing from the Karate Kid. I got books from the library, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna learn karate at my own pace in 30 minutes a day of training because the book is promised to make me a warrior. Unfortunately, that did not happen. So I'm still getting bullied, and it sucks. I mean, these kids are really picking on me. Like every night I'm crying myself. And then even one time they beat the shit out of me so bad that I started crying because I was like, it was terrible. And I went to Catholic school, and then we would go, and most of these schools have a church, and I'll go to the church and I'd be like, this is where I got into my resentment with Jesus Christ. And I had this problem. And my problem was, if you're such a fucking powerful God, why is this happening to me? Like, I just got my ass kicked, and here I am on my knees again praying to you. I'm praying I don't get my ass kicked again. And it got bad. Because now when bullies sense fear, or they sense that you can't defend yourself and they can kind of just make fun of you and take advantage of that, you become a target. So now I got kids on the bus whooping my ass like crazy. And it is just like, wow, this is the beginning of the school year. I'm going to be stuck here for another year, at least until June. I got to figure something out. So we used to go see these action movies all the time. My dad would always take me to the movies. We would see everything. You know, Charles Bronson, Schwarzenegger. I was highly versed in this genre. And the reality of the situation was that I needed to figure something out, because I didn't want to tell my dad that I was getting my ass whooped, because not that my dad was kind of like a macho asshole or anything, but I think there was a degree of like, you know, you've got to be able to handle yourself. And I just didn't know what I was going to do. Like, we were moving. My mom had just had a miscarriage, and then I had a baby brother on the way. There was a lot of things happening. So with all that going on, everybody's focused on the move. They're focused on the brother on the way and everything else that's going on. And I kind of got swept under the rug by my parents. So one fateful night when this movie came out in March, I went to the movies. So what ends up happening is we go and see The Perfect Weapon like opening weekend. And for whatever reason, this movie gestates in my mind. And I am like, holy shit, I have to become Jeff Speakman. That's it. I'm a dumb little kid. I'm a dumb little fat kid. I'm like, this is the solution to all of my problems. Like, I'm going to become a martial artist in this movie. And again, this is why this movie works. You've got the vanilla kind of hero that it's a fantasy. And that became how I loved martial arts. Was I watched Bruce Lee, I watched Chuck Norris, watched Van Damme, watched Seagal. And I watched these guys and I'm like, that's the answer to my problems. This is it. I had kind of like this aha moment, and I'm watching him on that big screen and I'm just like, holy shit, I could do that. And then I see in the movie, usually in a martial arts movie, you got to go to the temple, you got to go to the wise old master, and you got to beg him to teach you and blah, 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 blah. Well, as a dumb white kid, you can't relate to that. But what you can relate to is going down to a strip mall, paying your tuition, and learning martial arts. So I begged my dad. I was like, Dad, at 11 years old, I have come to a conclusion, and the conclusion is that I need to learn Kempo. Desperately. I don't care what it is. So I looked, and again, these are the days before the internet and everything. I looked in all the phone books. How do I find a school? How do I find what Ed Parker taught? And I looked and I looked and I looked, and then I found a school, but it was Kempo, but with an M. And I'm like, Kempo? I'm like, well, close enough, you know, that makes sense. So I go to this school, and Kempo with an M is a little bit different. It comes from Okinawa, and it's kind of like the repeating hurricane. You just keep striking, like it's like endless strikes, which Kempo and Kenpo have in common. I meet this man, he's Kiyoshi Giraldi. He learned in Okinawa because he was stationed there in military, which was very common at the time. He was the real deal. He wasn't just a guy who had opened a dojo in a strip mall. Like, this guy lived it. Him and his wife were both martial artists. They were both into acupuncture. They were into like herbs and roots and spirituality and Buddhism. So thank God, go to knock again. Thank God I found this guy, because he was able to give me something that I think my father didn't. And we learned something very quickly. I did, at least. I was good at martial arts. Shit, I couldn't play the flute. I couldn't play the piano. That was out. I tried playing soccer and some other things. I was terrible at that. But what I was good at was martial arts. So it was like the first time as a kid where like I found something that I'm passionate about. This is mine. I understand this. I understand the spiritual beliefs. It brings me into a different place because now I learn how to meditate. I learn all these things. I'm still getting beat up at school, but the difference is every night I'm throwing a couple of hundred kicks and I'm punching and I'm getting better and better. And then I got my yellow belt. And it's a very hard Japanese style, which means it's very similar to what you saw in The Karate Kid. It's meat and potatoes Japanese martial arts. This is, no nonsense stuff. We're doing push-ups on our knuckles. We're getting hit with bamboo. It's nasty. I remember the first time that I got a bloody nose from fighting in the dojo, and I got blood on my gi. And he was like, nah, he's like, that's good. He's like, it means that you're learning, and I realized how much I love that white gi, because when I put that on, I was a superhero, like it changed me, and it changes the course of my life. And like, that's because of this stupid movie. It's this stupid white guy karate movie. But it gave me the idea that I could be something more, that I could defend myself. And I stuck with it. Other than making movies with my friends and stuff, this was like all throughout high school, all throughout junior high, this was all I gave a shit about. Can I do a split? Yes, I was able to do when I was a kid. I used to do the splits. It was insane. Like, I started meeting other kids that were into martial arts. We started hanging out and studying different styles and exchanging ideas. But this story does have a happy ending. And the happy ending was that one day a bunch of these kids try to assault me on the bus. And now, after all this time, it's become automatic. I kicked the shit out of these kids. So bad, in fact, that I broke one kid's ribs. And he was in pain, and the bus had to pull over, and it was bad. It was a big deal. But what ended up happening was this kid, he was just so winded, and we didn't realize that his ribs were broken. But now, when you're a kid who's like in 6th grade and you break another kid's ribs on a bus, and there's a whole bunch of witnesses, oh shit. So I was like, a part of me was, even though I wasn't a bad kid, I'm still not really a bad person. There was a sense of power and satisfaction that I had never felt before. And I said, holy shit. Yeah, like, I hate this kid. And that kid never fucked with me again. That kid wouldn't even talk to me. He wouldn't even look at me. And it was just the craziest fucking thing, because then the next day the word was out that this kid had to go to the hospital. And I also felt something that made me happy, but also confused me. And what I felt was, I felt a little bit of bloodlust, because now I had finally used what I had been learning, because I went through a whole cycle of seeing The Perfect Weapon in March and just getting beat up and picked on. And now we're in September. So I've been training all summer. I've been doing the things. I've been getting stronger, leaner. And I felt, well, fuck that kid. I felt like, yeah, you know what? He had it coming. So I had a couple of other kids that tried to fight me after this, that even after the story, and because things like this, especially in the early 90s, became like a legend. Like, kids talk. It's like, yeah, he beat up 30 people, he beat up the whole bus. He threw the bus over his head. I also wasn't ready for that. I thought I was going to be cool, and I wasn't necessarily cool. I was looked at somebody who was dangerous, and I had to go to the school psychologist, like, oh, your son fucking beat up like 3 people, put a kid in the hospital. So it became like this weird thing where, instead of feeling proud, and my parents were like, you've got to defend yourself. Like, it wasn't like I came home and got in trouble. They were like, this is what you should be doing. That same month, there was like these brothers, and there was like 3 of them, and they were much bigger, because, junior high and like high school, like the kids, like there's kids who go through growth spurts, and they got mustaches, and 3 kids, they're in 8th grade. And they tried to jump me out in the schoolyard, and I beat the fucking bricks off of those kids. And that time it wasn't as nice, because it was really fighting a bunch of people, and it was nasty. This is what happens. Look, we Game Boy was still new. We didn't have things. The world was a different place. And for whatever reason, I fought. Like, that's why I see this show Cobra Kai and it's over the top and stuff. And I'm like, this is kind of what I grew up with in junior high, was fighting these kids. This kid who used to bully me, I'm not going to say his name on the air because I don't want to whatever, but his name was Jimmy. And him and his brothers used to mercilessly bully me. What ended up happening was I had a bunch of them jump me in the schoolyard. And then I was like, all right. So I took out one or two of them, I'm kicking these kids, I'm punching them, just, you know. And the other thing too is when you're a kid and you have all that energy and you have all this like new testosterone, you know, you're going through puberty, it's like, you're not quite sure how strong you are yet. You might be stronger than you think you are, even though you're a dumb little kid. I realized like I split this kid's head open and everything. And I'm like, there was a part of me like, do I go further? Where does this stop now? Like, how bad do I have to beat these kids before they leave me alone? Luckily, it left me alone, but it made me kind of a social pariah. And most people were like I would try to like, you know, hang out with other kids and their parents had heard about the incident and they were like, I don't know if you should hang out with that kid. Like, he's something wrong with him. There was nothing wrong with me. I was just defending myself at this point. Now, follow up on this story. Guess what? Years later, now in high school, I'm much stronger. I start going through a growth spurt. I become bigger. I get better at martial arts. I get better at weapons. And then one night, I run into Jimmy at a party because he lived a town over. And, you know, it's one of those things where, like, you know, kids from different towns, you start seeing each other. And we're leaving this house party, and he's right there. And it's just me and him in the darkness of this driveway. And I basically went up to him like, you know, you and your brothers used to really bully me, and it was pretty fucking terrible. And like, he couldn't even say that he was sorry because this kid was just such an asshole. But I guess this was my Johnny. And I told him on that dark driveway, I was like, you know, right now there's nobody around. It's just you and me. It's just you and me. And I could fucking kill you right now. And I wasn't kidding. I was like, I could fucking beat you to death and there's nothing you can do about it. And he was so fucking scared because he knew it was the truth. And that's when I realized I had the realization that Jeff Speakman has to come to at the end of this movie was just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I felt more satisfaction that we knew that that could happen. And it was high probability it was about to happen. But I also learned other things through martial arts. I learned spirituality. And I learned that if you are capable of something, it doesn't mean you should do it. It means 99% of the time, you're walking away from fights. And if you have to get into one in the real world, here's a little tip from Jerry. You put them out quick. And especially like if you're in a metro area, you're at a concert, that guy had a heart attack and you get the fuck out of there. And be like, oh my God, he's having a seizure. No, he's not having a seizure. You just fucking neutralized him. But I found more power knowing that I had power, but not the ability to use it, the ability to decide whether or not I should. And that gave me a sense of autonomy and independence that I had never had before. And this is all because of this stupid movie. Like, that's the fucking crazy thing about this. And I always wanted to, you know, he's still out there. And shit, it might happen. I gotta cash in those chips quick because, you know, people come, people go. And unfortunately, you know, tell your heroes, whether it's a person you respect, it's a cousin, could be your dad, anybody, tell them. Tell them, because this is not an endless well. Just because you saw the sunset today doesn't mean you're going to see it tomorrow. So if there's people in your life that mean something to you, tell them, because they're not going to know. People can't read minds. So, you know, thank you to Jeff Speakman. Thank you. You had a profound effect on my life. And, you know, I never thought that I would be doing the things I'm doing today. Like, I'm doing this podcast. It's hard for me to speak. I'm choked up, and I didn't think that talking about a 90s martial arts revenge movie, which is kind of all of them, would put me in this place. But, it's good. Sometimes we have to go back to these memories. We have to go back to these things that make us feel uncomfortable. And even in the last year, like now, I lost 100 pounds. And the reality of the situation is that you have to put yourself in some very painful places. And it's just like martial arts. You don't learn from the good shit. You don't learn from winning the championship. You learn from the pain. The pain and the suffering is your greatest teacher. It's trial by fire. And only until you've felt that pain, only until you've had these scars, had your teeth knocked out, had all this stuff happen to you, only then can you come from a place of deeper perspective and power and move forward. And that's important. So if you take anything away from this episode, A, get your kids into martial arts because it's a good thing. If you get the right teacher, there's bad teachers. We saw in Cobra Kai, Sensei Kreese is a bad guy. And I ran into some Sensei Kreeses. I ran into phonies, but luckily, as I was able to go on, I was able to sort those guys out and sort out the phonies, sort out the guys that were just wacko ex-military guys who wanted to fucking hurt people. And that's not what martial arts is about. It's an art form, and it is a way of self-expression. Jeff Speakman, every day, Ed Parker was on set, his teacher, his master, every day. He's like, dude, you're going to get this right. You're going to get this right. He goes, because you're showing my style to the world, and they got to see it done the right way. Jeff was like, it was the ultimate mentor father figure to him. And they do this movie. Ed had started getting sick, and he was like, listen, we're doing a night shoot tonight, for the final fight. It's going to be like 4 a.m. I don't want you out. You're 50 something years old. You're getting sick. And Parker was like, nah. And he was there every day from the beginning to the end. And it's so sad because what ends up happening is they finish shooting the film and it's gone into post-production. Ed Parker's mother was really sick. His family, they lived in Honolulu. He goes back to Honolulu. He steps off the plane and he fucking drops dead. Just drops dead. He had a bad heart. Ultimately, he never saw this film. When you get to the end of the movie, it says this film is dedicated to Ed Parker and the spirit of Kempo. And it's crazy because the perfect weapon is the perfect homage. And it brought this beautiful art to so many people. Jeff Speakman now, he's got over 500 fucking schools all throughout the world. It became this thing that was like a message. And I was a part of it. And I got the message. And it's sad that Ed Parker never got to see the fruition of his best student, but also what would be his legacy. And his legacy is the perfect weapon. And so many kids, so many people were inspired by this movie to go and just fucking learn karate. And that's pretty cool for a stupid movie that was meant to compete with Seagal and Van Damme. Now, unfortunately, we know this does not end the way that it should. It should be a triumphant ending, but the whole point of what Jeff Speakman did was, it's what we always hope for our children, or we hope for the people, the next generation, our younger brothers and sisters. And we hope that they can go on and do what you couldn't and somehow push that dream forward. It might have been your dream, but now it's even better because somebody else is doing it. The movie comes out. All right, we're going to get to it. The movie comes out. It cost $10 million. It made $15 million. What ends up happening is, in the time, Frank Manusco Jr. walks away from Paramount, starts developing stuff independently, and he loved all the genre movies. And they bring this new regime in, and they're like, all right, we've got marketing budgets, but we think the marketing budget should go into this Wayne's World movie. And they were like, oh, fuck. They're like, you know what? Let's pull back all the money we were going to spend on The Perfect Weapon. We already spent $10 million on the budget. Let's just, let's put that towards Wayne's World. So thanks, Garth. Thanks a lot, you dick. No, it's fine. It is what it is. But you know what? The Perfect Weapon plays on TV, still plays. It plays in every language. People love it. It ended up making $40 million on VHS. So in the end, he really did kind of have the last laugh. What happened to Jeff Speakman? How does this apply to this season? It's a franchise non-starter. Because in theory, Jeff Speakman should have gone on to make 10 of these films. You know, I was joking around with producer Pete. The second one should have been The Ultimate Weapon. We should have just made, he could have made 5 movies called Bump, 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 Weapon. Whatever it is, The Weapon. But he didn't. What happens is Mark DeSalle ends up hooking back up with Van Damme, and he's doing other stuff with him. He was signed to a 3-picture deal with Paramount and a 4-picture deal with Mark DeSalle. Mark DeSalle, cool guy, he's like, all right, dude, I'm just going to let you out of the contract. You do you. Go find some other pictures. I'm going to go work with Van Damme. Peace. No, I'm sure it wasn't that bad. But Paramount says to themselves, we don't really need it, because this is what happens in Hollywood. And it's just a sad story that, like, you become the shiny new toy and we love you. It happens all the time where it's the system. It's the business. We take these people, we put them on a pedestal, and then we love knocking them down, because you got to take people down a peg sometimes. What was crazy was that the people at Paramount, before Frank Manusco Jr. left, he said, I've got a really good script for the sequel to this. And he's like, well, what's the sequel? He's like, dude, you're on a bus, but the bus gets taken hostage. And this was, post Die Hard. So we had to do Die Hard on a boat. We had to do Die Hard in a fucking refrigerator box. We had to do all of them. What ends up happening is that movie, they said, I don't know. Perfect Weapon didn't do that good. I'm not interested. They sell that movie to 20th Century Fox and it becomes Speed, which is fucking insane that Speed was developed as a Perfect Weapon sequel. Which would have been crazy, because how many people can he really fight? Like, how would he fight on the bus? Once he whoops a bunch of people's asses, like, okay, well, I guess we, but I think the turn was like, can we make him into a big action star? And unfortunately, that didn't happen. What did happen was one of the last canon movies that was ever made was Street Night. And Street Night was, about a cop who kind of couldn't work for the force anymore because of his beliefs and whatever. And Street Night is not too good, but it's enjoyable. A really funny story. Over by us, we had the Comac Multiplex, and they used to have all these big cardboard standees. And I'm sitting there after The Perfect Weapon, for like a year or two, and I'm just like, man, when am I going to get that next Jeff Speakman, whiff? When am I going to get that hit? And then I see the big cardboard cutout of Jeff Speakman. And I said to my friends, I'm like, guys, this probably isn't right. My dad's coming to pick us up. I'm stealing this. So I grab the Jeff Speakman cardboard cutout. I go running out of the movie theater because, again, I'm like 12 years old. Security stops us and they're like, all right, what are you doing? It's like this guy, he's like 8 feet tall. He's like, give me that thing. All right. And before I got half of Jeff Speakman's cardboard body into the car, I was like, Dad, I was like, drive. I don't care what happens. Just drive the car. And everybody's just like, what is happening here? Why is he shoving this cardboard? So they took it back or whatever. They were like, we're not going to call the cops. Just give us the fucking cardboard cutout back. You're a weirdo. You're a dumb little weird kid. You're stealing this. Are you going to make love to this? This is weird, because it's very kind of like this little buff Jeff Speakman on the thing. Luckily, Street Night did come out on home video, and I used to go to this place, West Coast Video. They had the cardboard cutout, and I was like, oh, there it is. I was like, it was my like Gollum with the ring. It was my precious. He's like, yeah. He's like, I think we have a cutout coming in for some Halle Berry movie or something, and we're going to get rid of this. He's like, do you want it? I'm like, boy, do I ever. And I put that in my bedroom. This is a gigantic cutout that I didn't have room for. Jeff Speakman with a gun. He's Street Night. No gun, no weapon, no equal. Oh, wait, no, it was no gun, no knife, no equal, which they just started using on every movie. I had that in my bedroom, and former guest, sick plug, Screamwalker's director Sean King would see it in my bedroom, and he would be like, "What's wrong with you, dude? You're like, you got this fucking goofy cutout," and I felt like it was the lowest it could get. I'm like, you don't know, Sean, how much fucking Jeff Speakman means to me, and yeah, it meant a lot to me. I had that for years. Eventually, Jeff started falling apart, and one night I left the window open, and it rained, and Jeff Speakman got wet. And instead of multiplying other little Jeff Speakman cardboard standees, I had to throw them out. It was very upsetting. I had to take them apart. It was a terrible moment for me. It was a terrible moment for my family. We still haven't recovered. Please put us in your prayers and best wishes. Donate money to, Anyway, Cardboard Cutout didn't survive high school. So, yeah. I think the point of this, he goes and does a bunch of other movies. He does Memorial Day, which is pretty terrible. It's exactly what you think it is. He does Running Red, where he plays a Russian, wait, you know what? They're all the same. They're all just really terrible. But I would watch these movies, and as bad as they were, there's one called The Expert, and Jim Varney is in it. He plays a weapons dealer. It's like the craziest movie. James Brolin is the bad guy. He breaks into a prison to go kill the guy who killed his sister. And it's actually a pretty good movie. The Expert's good. You got to watch it on YouTube unless you can find a VHS of it. It barely exists. He did all these movies. They tried different things. Jeff Speakman, it just never happened. But he never forgot his first love. And he was always just working on these movies. But what more importantly, he was working on his schools. And like I said, he's got over 500 worldwide. He's got all these schools. And guess what? In 2022, Jeff Speakman finally became a master. He is now a master of Goju Ryu and Kempo. He's the guy. He's out there. He's actively teaching. And you can find him. You can go to his schools. He's got schools everywhere from California to Massachusetts. You can go learn Kempo right now. I mean, fuck, you know what? You listen to this podcast, you're like, I got to lose some weight. Go join a martial arts class. Take it. See what you think. What's the worst that can happen? You get your ass kicked? Guess what? Life is a series of ass whoopings. And it's not whether you win or lose. It's how you respond and what you learn from those ass whoopings. So with that being said, in 2018, Jeff Speakman almost died. He got cancer. He got brain cancer. And guess what? He beat it because he's a fucking perfect weapon. And he beat the shit out of cancer. And it's fucking amazing. Thank you, Jeff Speakman. Thank you for being so influential and instrumental to my childhood. The Perfect Weapon is a banger. It's 88 minutes. It's exactly what you think it is. It's a martial arts revenge movie. It goes down smooth. It's still good. Kino Lorber just put out this amazing disc. I want to thank Mark DeSalle, director, who did the commentary with Big Mike Leader. Look, if you're an action person, Big Mike Leader, he's worked on all the Hong Kong pictures. He's fantastic. I've talked to him on social media. Really nice guy. It's out there. Get that Kino disc. I think it was on sale for like $15 on Amazon this show. Who knows? It'll be out of print. Definitely pick it up, though. It's a definite recommend. If you like action movies, this is a heck of an action movie. And the best part of it is it's not a cheap one. They put money into this movie. It was shot on backlots. You got a fantastic supporting cast. And I think that's why it works. Because yes, Jeff Speakman is the vanilla white guy karate guy, but you've got Mako, you've got Dante Bosco, you've got Professor Toru Tanaka, and it all works for whatever reason. And I feel there was a missed opportunity with Jeff Speakman. I think he could have done 10 of these movies and they would have been great. But unfortunately, we don't live in that timeline. We live in the worst timeline where, I don't want to get into that guy again, but whatever. And like I said, I've had troubles. I've had troubles with, that was the thing with Steven Seagal. I loved Steven Seagal as a kid. But now it's like, he might have had a sex dungeon. He might have raped his babysitter. He's not a good person. He's an enemy of the state. He just held a rally for Putin. Like, this is not a good man. But Jeff Speakman, on the other hand, still running those dojos, still kicking ass, beat the shit out of cancer. And I think out of all the people I could have chosen as a role model or a hero, I chose wisely. So, It's that time in the show for an unhinged review. And I'm going to tell you, I really searched high and low. And this is not because I love this movie or not because he was my hero as a kid, but there's not a lot of bad reviews for this movie. Most of the reviews for this movie are like, dude, I took a fucking karate class and it changed my life. That is like 90% of the reviews for this movie. The critical response to this wasn't that bad. Siskel and Ebert didn't review it, so I was very upset about that. I was like, they didn't see both of these men passed away and did not get to see The Perfect Weapon? What world am I living in? But most of the critics were like, this guy, he's a good-looking guy. He beats people up. It's exactly what you think it is. But it's nothing more and it's nothing less. It's just another martial arts film. And you have to understand, in 1991, they were making one of these a week. Not as good as this, but they were making them. And it was a sea of revenge and blood and, blood rage, blood ring, blood sport. It was just, it got lost in the sauce. So I did find one review for our unhinged reviews. And it's great. It's a 5 out of 5 star reviews from James W. Verified Blu-ray purchase. Title, 90s action awesomeness with 3 S's. You need to watch this, man. Kempo karate, Mako, and it's getting kind of hectic. It's getting kind of hectic. And that's it. That's the legacy. I got the power. It's an empowering movie. You can go and strike down your enemies. And if someone kills a wise old Korean grocer that was a friend of the family, you can go and avenge their murder. If that's anything you take from this episode, is that martial arts will give you the ability to kill a whole lot of people. But you know what? At the end of this movie, he doesn't kill the bad guy. And that was the lesson to Dante Bosco. Dante's like, yo, you're going to ice these dudes, you're going to kill these dudes. And he's like, nah, I got to fucking set an example for you, because if I kill this guy, Dante Bosco is going to be like, he's going to think murder is cool. And he's trying to teach the kid, like, no, murder is not cool. This is not what I was taught. And at the end of the movie, he goes back to the dojo. He goes back to Master Lowe, and he goes back to Mariska Hargitay to have the non-romantic thing that got cut out for the TV version, whatever. That's the most important part of this movie, was what did he learn? He learned that in revenge, in combat, no one really wins. And that's an important, it's nice when these guys are able to kind of tie that stuff in, that like, yeah, like this is cool and it's awesome that I'm beating these dudes up, but at the end of the day, this is probably not the best course of action. So he goes back to Master Lowe's. The door is closed behind him, and we see that, because you know what? He might be good, but he's not the master yet. He's learning. So I think that's a lesson for life. And the lesson here is never stop learning. Because once you stop learning, if you say, oh, I know all that. No. Go keep learning, because when you stop learning, you're dead. When you have no more natural curiosity, you probably don't belong here anymore. And there's just, life is a learning process. And what I learned most importantly from The Perfect Weapon is that if you see something, if you see a football player, you see somebody who's doing gardening, whatever it is, if it inspires you, go fucking do it. Tomorrow, when you wake up and you say to yourself, oh man, I should really take that racquetball, course, or I should really just fucking do it. Just do it. Nike told you, they put it there. It's the blueprint. And if you go out and you chase it, you'll find it. And more importantly, you'll find more about yourself and more about this world. And the thing is that when you open a door, it opens the opportunities. When you close doors, like in life, when you shut yourself out of things, you have to bring in those new experiences. And that's very important, especially the older that you get. With that being said, I hope you've learned something from this episode. I'm not quite sure, but it was a movie that I needed to do, because I think that I'm not just telling the stories of these movies, I'm telling my story, intertwined with terrible films like Staying Alive. God, that movie's awful. It gets in your mouth and you drink stuff and it's still there. But I hope that you've learned a little bit more about me and why I do what I do. And I'm not quite sure sometimes, because I'm still on that journey myself. But I love talking about movies, and I probably do too much, and I annoy my friends and family, so this gives me a place to do that. But more importantly, I like telling you guys about my life. And it's high time that I tell these stories because eventually I won't be able to. And at least with something like this, you know the story about Jerry getting his ass kicked in Catholic school. Hopefully you can relate. Maybe you can't. But in one way or another, I ask for empathy. I ask for forgiveness because then you learn something. And then we all learn something and we're all enlightened together. Hey, it's been The Offering. With me, your host, Jerry Horror. Mostly horror, always genre. You've been listening to The Offering with Jerry Horror. I'm very sorry. Produced by Pete Bune. If you have a question or story you want to share with me, we'd love to hear from you. You can email me at jerryhorror@gmail.com or hit us up at Twitter @jerryhorror or on Instagram @jerryhorror. You getting the picture? Subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are provided for you and your family. I want you to enjoy. Just join us next time for another offering.
This has been a Sick Boy Wolfgang production. Thank you for listening.